Good morning, good afternoon. You're looking at live pictures from Air 11 of Lower Manhattan, where the World Trade Centers used to stand. As you can now see, only remains a giant plume of smoke coming from the fires which burn below. That smoke is still very dark, which means there are still fires on the ground. As you can well imagine, commercial jets which are flying from one part of the country, from one coast to the other coast, would be carrying a large amount of fuel. That, of course, will be burning for some time, as well as all the additional stuff on the ground and in the buildings themselves, which add to that fuel. So it will take quite some time to get this fire under control. Now, as you well know, there has been a no-fly zone put in effect for the entire country. The FAA is not allowing any planes to fly. We are flying, and the only newscopter up at these points, so these are exclusive pictures brought to you by Air 11. What we can also tell you is that Linden Airport at this point is being prepared as a possible triage center. Teterboro, along with the New Jersey State Police, have set up a command post for medevac flights. The Air Force is bringing in rescue helicopters, the type that were used in the perfect storm. They're called PJs. So there's quite a lot of mobilization going on the air traffic portion of this as well. Now, we were up when we first saw the buildings burning before they collapsed, and we did witness the buildings collapsing. And I'm telling you, I saw it on television, I saw it with the naked eye. It is something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. I've seen a lot of things which have been very upsetting. There is something about just watching them collapse upon themselves which was just overwhelming. The first building really kind of looked like an implosion. It fell into itself, and then not too long after that, we watched the second building, which was Tower 1, very closely. Tower 1, of course, was the first building hit. It was hit a little higher than the second building, and so it took a little longer to collapse. And we saw it first buckle, and then it did collapse upon itself as well. It looked again like an implosion, and it just came raining down. Before the actual implosion, we saw a lot of debris falling from the building, and sadly people jumping from windows to get away from the actual fire, I suppose. It was a very, very upsetting sight. And now, of course, watching Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, still on fire, still burning, it is still a very devastating sight. Now, the smoke is going mostly straight up in the air, but it is blowing somewhat to the east and towards the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, towards the Gowanus as well. Very good idea to keep your windows closed. It's hard to say what is in that smoke besides, of course, the jet fuel and all the other noxious fumes. Some of the buildings may have had asbestos in them. The buildings, of course, were sealed with the asbestos, but they were still in some of the basements of the buildings. So, of course, it's a very good idea to keep those windows closed. And, of course, if you're on the roads this morning, it's a very good idea to keep your windows closed. Speaking of the roads, there are very few cars on the roads out here in New Jersey where we are sitting. We are over the New Jersey Turnpike right now. The roads are basically deserted. We only see a few cars, and again, it seems most people have sought shelter of some sort, gone to someplace that they felt is safe, and are not driving this morning, which is probably a good idea at this point. All of the crossings in and out of Manhattan are closed. We understand a lot of people are hoofing it, are actually walking on foot across the Brooklyn Bridge right now, trying to get away from this scene. It is a good idea to stay away from the scene. This is not a time for sightseeing. They won't let you anywhere near down there anyway. And of course, rescue workers definitely need their space to be able to do what they need to do. That right there is people walking across the Manhattan Bridge. It's hard to see because of where we are, but trust me, there are a lot of people making their way across the Manhattan Bridge out of Manhattan, just trying to get away from this scene. And of course, we do have a lot of rescue workers on the scene. We have a lot of EMT workers, a lot of firefighters, a lot of American Cross. If you're looking for something to do to help, here's a few basic things you can do. First of all, don't turn on your water. Turn off your washing machine. Turn off your dishwasher. They need all the water pressure they can get. Also, you can always call the American Red Cross and volunteer. You can always give blood. These are things you yourself can do. Speaking of water pressure, they are using a very unique piece of firefighting equipment to actually battle this blaze. It's called the Firefighter, and it is actually a boat. This boat is capable of sucking water directly out of the river, which is good in case there are some problems with the water mains because of these explosions. This boat sucks the water out of the river and then pumps it to another pumper. It can do 11,000 gallons of water per minute, and then they do what's called a relay pump. It goes from pumper to pumper to pumper to pumper in order to get water onto this fire. Also involved in this are some tugboats volunteering their services as well. What you may not realize is that some of the older tugboats actually are able to suck water out of the rivers themselves, and you can hook hoses up to those tugboats and get water onto the fire that way as well. So it's it's nice to see such a volunteer effort here and so many people coming together to actually battle this. Now, as far as air traffic goes, as we mentioned, we are the only helicopter, the only news helicopter up in this part of the country, as far as we know. And again, there are no other aircraft allowed up except for the military and for rescue operations as well. And so they are being very kind to let us bring you these live pictures. We are hovering at close to 2,000 feet. The smoke plume, I would say, is maybe 3,000, maybe 4,000 feet at this point. It goes far into the air and can be seen for quite some distance. We were out at Linden Airport, and we can see it without any problem. It is an amazingly huge smoke plume, something like I have never seen, and I have covered quite a few fires in my time. Also, you can see that the smoke is very, very dark in the center there. That means that there is still fire. Things are still burning at this point. White fire or white smoke traditionally means that there is some water on there, some steam. The dark fire, or the dark smoke rather, means that things are on fire. So you know that firefighters are still battling and will be working for quite some time to get this under control. To give you an idea of just how devastating this is, if you look at that curved structure in the center of the screen, that is the facade of the World Financial Center. That's where the World Financial Center used to be. And if you look now, behind it, there is nothing to see. The building is gone. It is really upsetting to actually be sitting here. I look at it with the camera, it seems a little less real, but I look out and think that I was flying only a few hours ago right by the World Trade Centers. And in fact, we were just talking about what a beautiful city it is to fly around. And then hours later to look and see that the entire lower part of Manhattan has totally changed its look. It is just overwhelming. It's something like I'm having a little trouble personally dealing with it. I'm sure everybody at home feels the same way. Meanwhile, one more time, you are looking at live pictures from Air 11. Again, we are the only aircraft in the air at this point. As far as we know, no other newscopters are up there, being very gracious to allow us to bring you these live pictures. And again, we are hovering at about 2,000 feet. You can see just how high these smoke plumes go up into the air. It gives you some idea of just what they're having to deal with and what they're battling down on the ground this morning, or this afternoon rather. Also, I can tell you that we have basically talked to different people, and we understand that Linden Airport is preparing possibly to work as a triage center. Teterboro, along with the New Jersey State Police, are setting up a command post for the medevac flights, and Air Force is sending rescue helicopters, the same type that were used in the perfect storm. They're called PJs, and Blackhawks. They're sending those as well in order to actually come in and work on this particular location and this scene. Again, it's like something I've never seen. It looks like a scene out of a movie. I can't really believe it's real. It hasn't quite sunk in yet. The entire landscape of Manhattan has totally changed from one very tall section of the city to a very smoky, flattened area. It's just overwhelming to realize that there's nothing there. As far as the roads go this morning, we do not see hardly any cars on the roads. I mean, there's very, very few cars out this morning, very few trucks. Most people have gone home, it seems, or have sought shelter somewhere. Again, all the crossings in and out of Manhattan are completely closed, so you can't take your car in or out either way. I know that my husband works down there, and he got out of Manhattan on the ferry, so that was one possible way. Some people are actually walking the bridges, and we saw people walking across the Manhattan Bridge earlier. The Brooklyn Bridge, we also understand people are walking across as well. Now, yes, I do. I've just been talking this whole time. I wasn't live. Got it. Well, that's good practice. That's okay. We have it on tape. All right. That's exactly right. Me too. So they're Black Hawk Sikorsky helicopters that are coming in with PJs, which are the paramedics. Power rescue. Where? Dubreski? Okay. My favorite is that I just talk for a solid 6 minutes and not... Didn't have to. It's okay. It's good practice. Our transmitter's on top of the World Trade Center. Channel 4 is on MSNBC. 2's broadcasting because 2 has a backup transmitter. Well, what good is that? I will say I have a really bad headache. Well, Mike. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, Anthony. Oh, we're just watching video from this morning on ABC. I hadn't seen that video yet. He crashed going really fast into it too. I'm actually glad I have to work. It doesn't let me deal with it. It makes me not have to deal with it. Does that make sense? Giuliani's having a bad year. Wife left me as cancer. That better? My brother said he heard 50,000 work in each building. It's 107 floors. You know, Daniela's husband's a cop in Brooklyn. Except for us. Looks like you're containing it to one area. Thank you. I keep saying we're exclusive. I say it over and over. Not that anybody had us on. Anthony? Anthony? He is? Anthony? I just want you to know we are the only helicopter allowed in the air today, period. We're it. It's like every now and then it washes over me. You know what it is, and then I kind of put it at bay for a while, and then it kind of washes over me again. The building he was in was collapsed on. Just when we really need him to stay. We really need Giuliani to stay right now. Whatever you think about him, he's a good mayor. They canceled the election today. I know you're spies, but you know. You know, in an odd way, Everybody had a lot of extra crews on today because of the election. We have 8 tonight. So, in a way, it's a good thing. I mean, you can't be more prepared than 8 crews. But then tomorrow morning we can't take off. That's his point.
I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, is it better for us to go to London?
I'd say will. But I don't see them closing the airspace for a couple days.
Well, any other disaster I would say no. But when it's all planes going down, who's going into Wall Street? Who's flying over there?
A couple of EMS ships that are going into Wall Street.
Wall Street's down here. Yes, I do. Is the F-15 still cruising? 3,500 feet? Okay. Can you imagine like the party that's going on at 2 fighters over Long Island? Canarsie?
I think it's a lifeline helicopter. They were about to intercept that flight helicopter.
They know we're up. They know we're up.
Oh, yeah. And at the top of the hour, I'll also call them and let them know that I'm still here. If you don't talk to somebody for a long time, anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes, you can only give them a courtesy call.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
That's why on the way in, I was very, very adamant about making sure that I had contact with the approach because they had contacted me first. Then I called them 3 or 4 times and they never got back.
Hang on. Hey guys, can I ask you not to talk on this thing unless you have to, because this is how we're getting our cues for live hits. Do you mind? Sorry, thanks. Yes. We're going live next. You can? No, I can't see where I'm sitting. Okay. You're looking at live pictures of Lower Manhattan, where the World Trade Centers once stood, now replaced by a large plume of smoke, which goes, I would say, probably 5,000 or 6,000 feet into the air at this point. As you can see, the smoke has now become white, which is a good sign. That means that more smoke is white smoke is steam, and that means water getting onto the fire. However, there is still a lot of dark smoke in there, and that, of course, means that things are still burning on the ground here. The smoke is now going more up into the air instead of out over the areas, but it's still a very good idea to keep your windows closed at this point, because this smoke is very noxious. You're not sure exactly what's in that smoke. Of course, there's some jet fuel in there as well as other things, so it's definitely a good idea to keep your windows closed. What you can see is that there is still a lot of T's. We have the ground as well. Everybody here trying to get ground still raging with what they are using besides just firefighting is because they definitely need to keep the water pressure going at this point. Think about these fire. Very physically difficult for these firefighters is emotionally difficult. That we are the now very kind to allow us to stay in the air so that you can photographs. And again, what we can tell you is that everybody else has been grounded. There are some F-15, some military planes around. Who's flying and who's going? Helicopters flying into the port. Their Black Hawk Sikorsky, the air paramedics, which are the, of course, power rescuers, or the PJs as they're called. These are the same people who before. Along with the New Jersey State Police, are setting up a command center as well. Injured there as well. Now, what we can also tell you is that we took off right after the two buildings first were hit, and we saw the buildings on fire. Tower 1, the top portion of it burning. Tower 2 was hit more towards the middle, and then we saw some debris falling from both buildings, even very disturbing the windows and from the tops of the building. The whole building seemed to collapse upon itself. Tower 1 collapsed a little bit later and just fell into itself rather than and completely collapsed. Now, as you can well imagine, anytime you have an aircraft which is fuel to go from one coast to the other, it's going to be carrying quite a lot of jet fuel. That jet fuel is highly flammable and probably spilt over a great section of Manhattan. So that is also adding to this fire, and it's going to take a long time again before they get this under control. Fortunately, New York, of course, has the best firefighters in the world, and we have additional equipment like the firefighter, which is that boat that we showed you before. Something else that's very interesting is that tugboats, you may not realize, are also able to pump water, and a volunteer corps of firefighters tugboat drivers have showed up. They are piloting their boats up here, and those boats, we believe, are actually hooking up to some lines now and are actually pumping water as well. And again, those would be volunteers just volunteering their time. If you yourself are interested in volunteering your time, it's a good idea to possibly call the American Red Cross. You could also, of course, always donate blood. And one really simple thing you could do is just turn off your water so that firefighters can have the water pressure that they need to be able to battle this blaze. As far as the roads go this morning, we are over near the New Jersey Turnpike. We've been asked to stay about 5 miles away from the actual World Trade Center. And what we see here is very few cars on the roads. It looks like kind of like a deserted place. Not very many people are out this morning, or this afternoon rather, at all. Most people, it looks, have gone home or have sought a safe haven so that they cannot go home. There are some cars on the New Jersey, on Route 3 rather, in front of us, and we see that there's a backup there. But for the most part, cars are not on any of the roads, and everything is pretty clear here. Again, we are the only aircraft that we know of in the entire country which is being allowed to fly at this time, which is not involved in the military or rescue operation. They are being very kind to allow us to bring you these live pictures from the air. And again, we are hovering at close to 2,000 feet, maybe 1,600 feet at this point, and this smoke plume goes way above us. I would say 5,000, 6,000 feet into the air. It is going more up into the air and not blowing so much anymore, but it is still blowing towards the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, and it is going over the Gowanus as well. If you're traveling or if you live in that area, very, very important to keep your windows closed today, because of the stuff that is in the smoke can be very noxious, very dangerous to you, and it's, again, very, very important to keep that closed. Now, again, what we can see here is mostly white smoke right now. That's a very good sign. That means that it's mostly steam, which is coming from water getting onto the flames. However, there is still dark smoke, which seems to erupt more. Every now and then we see more dark smoke than white smoke. The dark smoke, of course, means that there is things which are burning. There is definitely fire that they are still contending with, and it seems that it kind of goes through cycles. Sometimes darker stuff, then it goes white, and then it goes darker. Again, we saw this when it happened, and I've never seen a sight like this before. It was the most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my entire life, to suddenly see. We flew this morning. We saw the World Trades. They looked fabulous and gorgeous in the sunlight this morning. I think we even commented on it. And then within an hour, they were on fire. And now, of course, you look over and see the scape of New York, and it is a very, very odd and very sad and horrifying sight to see the entire landscape of Manhattan changed so suddenly and so quickly in just a couple of minutes. In just a few hours, everything has changed and everything is totally different. And one of the other strange sights for me is to actually see the Statue of Liberty standing not far at all from Lower Manhattan with her torch held high, and actually there's an American flag flying at some area out here as well. Think about all that represents, and then to see this horrible scene right behind it in the distance here. We saw this with our naked eye as well as on the television cameras, and let me tell you, with the naked eye, I saw it with the camera, and it was very, very disturbing. To see it with the naked eye was something that I will never, ever forget for the rest of my life. It was really, really upsetting. One more time, we are bringing you these pictures live from Air 11. We are the only aircraft, as we understand, which is being allowed to fly in the entire country at this point. There is a no-fly zone enforced by the FAA, and all the air traffic control towers are closed. All airports are closed. They are being very kind to allow us to fly. The only other aircraft up, as we understand, are those involved in the military and rescue operation. Helicopters, which are involved in the rescue, are flying into the Wall Street heliport, which is to the south of the World Trade Centers, and so that will be hopefully not too much into the smoke, because that makes it very difficult to fly, as you can well imagine. We understand that Air Force rescue helicopters, Black Hawk Sikorskys, are being flown in. They have onboard air paramedics, which are called PJs. They are the power rescue team, which you saw before in Perfect Storm. They have proved their heroism before and are certainly being called upon today. Makes you wonder how many people are actually working bit by bit who will never be heralded individually who are definitely doing their part and being heroes today in each and every way. Also, we can tell you as far as other things in the air go, Linden Airport, we understand, is possibly being prepared as a triage unit. We were told when we were there landing for fuel that they actually had cleared out one of the hangars to prepare it as a triage. Teterboro also has medevac flights. They are being the command center along with the New Jersey State Police. They are preparing the command center for the medevac flights. It is, of course, very close to Hackensack Hospital, which is also a trauma center as well. And, of course, as you know, New York City itself has 170 hospitals, but it's very important to be able to get people very quickly. That's why the medevac centers are being set up, and people outside of the New York area are being called upon as well. Now, what we can tell you is that the wind is somewhat strong today, although it's not horrible. And, of course, lower Manhattan always gets caught with wind anyway because of the different canals down there, the different canyons down there, and that definitely whips the wind around. But, fortunately, it seems that most of the smoke is going straight into the air, and I've never seen a plume of smoke like this. I've covered a lot of fires. This is unbelievable. I would say it's 5,000, 6,000, maybe even higher than that. And as you see, as I said, the smoke cycles. Sometimes it's white, sometimes it's dark. It seems to be darkening up again. That means that the fire is spreading and that other things are being eaten up by this fire. As I mentioned, both these planes were fueled with a lot of fuel on them. One was actually headed from one coast to the other, as I understand, and that would definitely mean that there would be a lot of fuel on board. Jet fuel definitely is a very big fuel for fires as well, and can cause big problems when the firefighters are trying to battle this. Of course, goodness knows what was in this building as well, and the buildings on the ground, the debris on the ground, which are also burning as well. One more time, you're looking at live pictures from Air 11, the only aircraft, as we understand, which is being allowed to fly in the entire country, which is not involved in the military or rescue operation. And this they're being very kind to allow us to bring you these live pictures here. At one point, we were able to show you the front of the World Financial Center. It is simply just a shell. It looks more like a facade than anything else. It used to be a beautiful building back behind it, and now basically there in the center of your screen is what is left of the actual buildings fell and toppled, and so of course many of the buildings also missing many other parts. We can't get any closer for obvious reasons, but you can certainly see the damage and destruction caused by the toppling of these two buildings. More buildings, of course, affected by this, more people injured, and it was not just the two World Trade Centers which were affected by this particular thing. As far as the roads go, we're over the New Jersey Turnpike right now. It pretty much is deserted. There are several cars on here, but I would say you could almost count them. You know, on one hand, maybe two hands. There's not very many cars at all. Most people, teams have sought shelter and not hanging out, driving around on the roads. They have gone home or gone to other places where they feel safe. One more time, you are looking at live pictures from Air 11. The aircraft, as we understand, being allowed to stay up in the air today. Everybody else has been asked to land. All the other newscopters have asked to land. We are the only people up in the air which are not involved in the military and or rescue operation at this point. What we can also tell you is that they're using very special firefighting equipment for this particular fire, something called the Firefighter. It is a boat which is parked on the west side of Manhattan here, and that is basically a boat which is able to pump water directly from the river onto the fire. How it works is that it sucks the water out of the river at 11,000 gallons per minute. It pumps it then to a pumper, which pumps it to another pumper. They call it a relay pump. That's it right there in the middle of your screen. That's the Firefighter. And it basically, that is the way that they are able to fight fires without actually having to drain the water mains, because of course the water mains are under tremendous pressure, and perhaps even some of them might have been damaged by the explosions. It's hard to say at this point. Fortunately, we have very specialized firefighting equipment like this, which makes it easier and better to fight the fires. Good news, too, is that we have the most specialized and the best firefighters in the world who are battling this blaze. Of course, they have quite a lot of work ahead of them. Not only are they battling the fire, but they're having to climb over all the debris, which is laying there in the middle of the street. As you can well imagine, it is a very physical labor here today, and obviously many of these firefighters must be quite exhausted. They also perhaps may have to be wearing air bottles, air tanks. Those air tanks carry 30 to 45 minutes worth of air at a time, so those have to think about that added weight of that equipment. It makes it all the more physical and very difficult to actually fight and battle this fire. Again, what we can tell you from the air here is that we are the only aircraft that is being allowed to stay up, which is not involved in a military and or rescue operation. There are other aircraft in this area, however. F-15s are up. We have seen them. Actually, they traditionally fly much higher, but we understood 2 of them were down lower, about 3,500 feet or so. That is because they were IDing a lifeline helicopter, a rescue helicopter, making sure they were really who they said they were. And that's good. We need to know that they're here today, and they are here today trying to protect us. In fact, the entire country has a cap over it, making sure that we're all safe. Now, there you can see up close what the ground looks like. The debris is overwhelming. It's just an overwhelming sight. And speaking of overwhelming sights, again, I mentioned before that we were up when the when the first 2 buildings had both caught on fire, when the World Trade Centers had both been hit. We were flying, and then we saw each one of them collapse individually. The first, before we saw the collapse, we saw debris falling from the building, and we actually saw people jumping from the building as well. After that, we saw the first building kind of shear off, and then the rest of the entire building seemed just to collapse and disappear in a plume of smoke. And then we watched while the second building started to buckle several minutes later, and eventually itself imploded upon itself, it looked like, and a huge, massive plume of smoke and debris came up into the air, and it was quite some time before it cleared, and we realized that indeed both buildings had completely disappeared. It was just overwhelming to look at the actual landscape of Manhattan and not see it anymore. We flew by it earlier this morning and thought, Josh, isn't that beautiful? It's the most beautiful thing you ever see. What a beautiful city on a sunny day like today. And now, several hours later, all it's been replaced by is smoke. It's just overwhelming. Anyway, that's pretty much what we know here from Air 11. I'd like to send it back to you guys in the studio. Was I even up? Do they ever wrap me? Yeah, I do. You know why? Because they were turn on one of them, but not both. Chet, you can always say to me, turn on your FMs. What was he saying? Rap? Well, it did take planning, and like they had to actually get on board. That's the thing. Somehow they planted some kind of weapon somewhere that they could get. I still can't quite figure out. I mean, the Pittsburgh guy seemed to do the right thing, which was to crash in the middle of nowhere. He knew he was going to die, you know? Yes. Oh, sorry. Hey, Anthony. It might be helpful if you say Q Larry. Q Melinda. I know, but if you say Q Larry instead so that he knows it's him. Just a suggestion. Yeah, sure. All right, can you, one more time, BDCEFJML57. And the A train.
Hey, Melinda, we are officially the only aircraft that is flying in this airspace.
All right, Anthony. What out of Grand Central Metro North you said? Got it, got it. My brother said he heard 50,000 per building. No. No. You can? By foot? Driving over the 59th Street Bridge. Yeah, check. Can you start out wide? Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. All right. Resumed, and normal service has not been restored on the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 9, right? Thank you. You're looking at live pictures from Air11. We are the only aircraft allowed to fly in this entire country, which is not allowed or not a part of the military and or rescue operation at this point. As you can well see, this is the section of Manhattan where the World Trade Centers used to stand, the lower Manhattan area. Now it's been replaced by a large plume of smoke which goes several thousand feet up into the air. That smoke is now darkened again, and that is because the flames are starting to flame up again. Several buildings are on fire at this point. This is making it even more complicated because they are having to attack several buildings with flames. Firefighters are having to look at many, many different areas of the city, not just one portion, not just one building on fire. And you can see how much this building is actually starting to gray up and smoke up and darken up. And that, again, seems to signify that we have a bigger flame and some more flames that are on our way. As far as the commute this morning, or this afternoon, here's what I can tell you. Subway service has been resumed on the A, B, C, D, E, F, J, M, L, number 5 and number 7 trains. It has not been resumed yet on the 1, 2, 3, or 9 train. Also, we can tell you that there is heightened security at Penn Station, as you can well imagine. Metro North is running out of Grand Central Station, but very limited service only. No tolls on any of the suburban railroads, so that's the good news there today. No tolls on the suburban railroads. 59th Street Bridge does have some traffic driving across it. Many of the other bridges have many people walking across it, the Manhattan and Brooklyn bridges in particular. LIRR does have some trains. Port Washington branch should go to the Woodside Avenue station in Queens. Also coming out of Flatbush Avenue and Hunters Point in Brooklyn, as well as Jamaica Avenue in Queens itself. That is what we know as far as the commute goes. We're looking at the roads in New Jersey right now. They're pretty much deserted. There are some cars on the roads, but they are very, very light when it comes to traffic. It seems most people have headed home or to some other safe haven, someplace they feel is safe. But again, the big story, of course, is the fact that as you look here, the World Trade Centers are no longer in our picture. You cannot see the World Trade Centers anymore. They are completely collapsed. It's hard to see exactly what the scene is from our vantage point, but you can definitely see the smoke is starting to darken again. It means more things are catching on fire. For a while, we saw a lot of white steam. Now the smoke again is starting to get to be very dark. Now, if you can imagine, these firefighters have been on the scene for more than 6 hours at this point. They are not only having to battle a blaze, they're having to battle the smoke and all the debris in the ground. ground. So it's a very physical fight as well as a very emotional fight for these firefighters as well as the EMTs and other rescue workers on the scene. Because the smoke is so incredibly noxious and so high and going so far, it's a good idea if you're in this general area at all to please stay inside, keep your windows closed. Do not use your water. They need all the water pressure they can get at this point. They do have some unusual firefighting equipment on the ground today. The Firefighter, which is a water boat. It is a firefighting boat, and basically it sucks water out of the Hudson River and takes it directly to a pumper, which relays it to another pumper, and it's called a relay pump. 11,000 gallons of water per minute. It's an amazing piece of equipment. Also on hand are volunteer tugboats piloted by volunteers who have again brought their tugboats down, which can also suck water out of the river and then have connected to different hoses in the general area and are able to then put water onto this fire without having to go into the water mains. It's hard to say. Perhaps some of the water mains may have even been damaged by this actual explosion and collapse of these buildings. But again, we have some unusual firefighting equipment in this area, which definitely the smoke is getting much, much thicker now. As we're looking at our window, we're hovering at about 1,600 feet, 1,500 feet. And I'm telling you, this smoke is probably 5,000 feet into the air. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And again, the smoke is getting much, much thicker. It seems to have rekindled. Something seems to have caught on fire, which obviously is adding a lot of fuel to this fire. And don't forget, it's not just one building that we're talking about on fire. Several buildings are on fire at this point. Many buildings have totally disappeared, not just the World Trade Center. We were looking at the World Financial Center earlier. All you can see that remains of the World Financial Center is the very front of the building. As I said before, we are the only air traffic control which is up. Air traffic control has asked us to land. We have been the only aircraft allowed for a couple hours at this point, and they have now asked us to land. So we're going to do that, and we're going to send it back to you. Back to you in the studio. Lyndon.
We cannot come back out.
I know, but tomorrow we go out of Caldwell. You guys decided, you know. They have told us to go back. We must land. We are landing now. So, that is the end of our coverage for today. Anthony. What? Anthony. Anthony. I still can't believe it's not there. Anthony? Are we powered down? They are making us land. Well, we can't go back up. That's it. We're not going to our regular airport either.